What's going on, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. It is Monday, May 13th. It is 9:30 a.m., and I'll tell you what, by about 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, Hutch and I were having some seriously depressing conversations about the Arkansas baseball team, but they came back. They erased all of those depressing conversations, uh, kind of accurately painted Hutch and I as pessimists along the way, and we have a lot to discuss with Arkansas baseball winning a weekend series against Mississippi State in some dramatic fashion on Sunday. We'll also touch on one Arkansas basketball commit this week. It's been a quiet one for John Calipari, but he did have some comments and quotes that we can kind of dive into and analyze about the roster's construction. Let's get into it. Let's bring in Hutch, play that rock music, and get started with the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. Hutch, how's it going, man? Have you completely done a 180 on this baseball team in the past 8 hours like I have? I mean, things were looking dark and scary for a while there this weekend, and all of a sudden the good vibes are back in Fayetteville. Feels like it might be a little bit of fool's gold to me, but regardless, a very important and big series win against Mississippi State. Hutch, what's your immediate reactions from this weekend at Baum Walker?
How about the offense showing up, man? I mean, I think that's got to be your top takeaway. I mean, yes, there are definite concerns. They got to figure out what the heck they're going to do with Brady Tiger and Mason Molina. But they showed this weekend that they are capable of winning games even when the starters and the pitching staff maybe doesn't perform like you expect it to. Even Hagen Smith only lasted 5 innings, and gave up 3 runs. I mean, he looked mortal. It was crazy to see, and they still won that game. And the backs against the wall, down 6-0, and all they did was score 9 unanswered runs. They hit I think 3 2-run home runs, and still found a way to beat a top 15 team that was playing about as good as anybody in the country the last few weeks. So to me, that's got to be your top takeaway, and has to make you feel really good that they have proven they can win a series like that.
Yeah, and not only did the offense come to life, but it came to life against a really good pitching staff. I'm pretty sure coming into this weekend that Mississippi State had the second best team ERA in the SEC. I'm almost 99% sure about that in only conference games because I believe our good friend Daniel Shee pulled that up with me Monday at the Swatters Club, and we were kind of looking at Mississippi State's pitching stats. But yeah, I think Dave kind of said in his press conference last night, he said, "I've been begging this team to make me fill out the same lineup card," and I think we're at a point now where when Jason Jones, when a lefty's on the hill, I think Jason Jones is probably going to be in left field, and Ryder Helfrich's going to be at DH. We still have to figure it out maybe with the righty, but the offense did do pretty well against righties this weekend. I mean, both of Mississippi State's top arms were right-handed guys. Um, the offense it's still a little bit of a concern for me just because is this a one weekend flash in the pan or is this a sign of them turning the corner? I think it might be a sign of them turning the corner, but I will say Kendall Diggs is still the biggest concern for me, and that didn't change this weekend. He struggled at the plate. I think he only had one hit, a lot of strikeouts too. Uh, didn't even start on Friday. Came out off the bench and had a pinch hit, deep fly to center field, but still an out. He's kind of the last real step, I guess, for this offense right now. If it's going to perform like it did this weekend, if it gets Kendall Diggs rolling, they absolutely can win a national championship. And all of a sudden, the concern turns to that starting pitching rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you saw it from several different guys in that lineup. I mean, Vahivo Loy, he had been kind of quietly struggling at the plate the last, couple of weeks, and all he did was have back-to-back 3-hit games. I don't know what he did. He went hitless in the finale, but he did his part the first 2 games, and Hudson White has stayed hot. And Sprague Lott had some good games. We saw Peyton Holt have the big go-ahead home run. It was really good to see from multiple different spots in the lineup, and they did it. This offensive explosion happened with Peyton Stovall, the best hitter on the team, the hottest hitter on the team. I think he only went 1 for 13 or something like that for the weekend. Now his one hit was a home run that I correctly predicted it would happen on the as the pitch was being thrown. But to me, that was just the best thing to see is how they got it from multiple different guys without, without the pitching staff and without Peyton Stovall. Like, if you had told me going into the weekend that your starting pitchers were going to combine for 7 2/3 innings and Peyton Stovall would have one hit, I might have said Arkansas gets swept, and all they did was win 2 out of 3. So that was just really, really good to see.
Yeah, not only Peyton Stovall, man. That Sunday game, they're down 6-0. They rally for a 9-6 victory. Kendall Diggs, Peyton Stovall, and Vahiva Aloy combined to go 0 for 11. I mean, we entered the season, those were the three best hitters. They were going to hit at the top of the lineup all season. And, they didn't do anything. And Arkansas was still able to get what Dave Van Horn called the best win of the season. I think you mentioned him, but Hudson White really is kind of the fulcrum of this resurgence for the offense. He's got 3 home runs in his last 5 games after not hitting one since opening day. And this was I think he kind of flew under the radar for the disappointment of his season just because Kendall Diggs was struggling. Vahiva hasn't had, this All-American type season. Arkansas has 4 catchers, and that kind of allowed Dave Van Horn to try some different things there, whereas Kendall and Vahiva both were everyday guys regardless of the struggles. So maybe we didn't put enough emphasis on this Texas Tech transfer that was expected to hit, second really high in the lineup and be a consistent bat, just wasn't producing. And that really had an impact on the lineup. Now he's going, and they are, again, it was just one weekend, but they've now had, I think, 4 of their last 6 SEC games. You go back to the Kentucky game or Kentucky series, they played well on Friday night offensively. So 4 of the last 6 SEC games, I think the offense has done enough to win. Even the loss on Saturday, I think typically with this pitching staff, scoring 5 runs is usually enough to get the job done. It wasn't against Mississippi State on Saturday, and that's because of Brady Tygert's struggles. And I think it's time we dive into that. Do you have any hope for Tigert and Molina? Do you think these guys are in the rotation next weekend? I mean, let's start there, Hutch. Who do you think is the Arkansas baseball starting rotation next weekend?
I think you're going to see Hagen Smith followed by TBA and TBA. I just, knowing Dave Van Horn, I feel like that's going to happen. Maybe he goes ahead and names Gage Wood as a starter. I do think he's going to start a game. Which game? I'm not 100% sure. Dave, he could, I guess, technically even, put Hagen Smith in game 2 if he wants to keep him on a Friday. But I have a feeling he's going to put him on Thursday, and they're going to try to wrap up this SEC West division title with him on the mound, and then kind of go from there. Dave even kind of said it we'll let the situation, kind of what the standings are, because they, the players say they don't really care about it, they don't look at this stuff, but Dave, he wants to win the SEC, he wants to win the SEC West, and if they've got a chance, that may influence it, but if not, who knows? I'm not quite sure what they do with it. I'm probably most concerned about Brady Tigert at this point, just because it seems like the fastball has been the issue. I mean, Dave said it last week, he said it again after a start, that he couldn't throw the fastball for a strike. His velo was down significantly this past weekend against Mississippi State. That is a concern, especially knowing Brady Tigert's history, with injuries and stuff like that. I'm not saying I have any type of inside scoop or anything like that, but it is concerning. Maybe he just needs a week or 2 off, and then he's going to be good to go for the postseason. I think Hagen Smith had that happen a couple of years ago, his freshman year, where he kind of, I think the velo dipped a little bit. He got tired. They gave him a week off, and then boom, he was rearing ready to go and was a key arm on that run to the 2022 College World Series. So maybe that can happen, but I don't know. Molina, I've got my concerns with too. Don't get me wrong. The dude hasn't been able to consistently throw strikes, since he got on campus. Really, I mean, during fall ball, he was struggled with walks. He's hard to hit, although Mississippi State jumped all over him. But it is concerning. But he at least has more of a track record as a starter than Brady Tigert does. He pitched really well at Texas Tech, in the Big 12. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. I think it's more of a mental thing. That's what Dave said. He said we can't do anything about up here. So maybe he just needs to go see a sports psychologist or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's concerning to say the least with those two guys.
Yeah, Mason Molina's ERA now for the season is up to 4.44. All of a sudden, man, the starting pitching staff, I mean, it's definitely no longer the best in the country. I mean, it's I don't think you can make that argument anymore. Um, I know he's going to write TBA, but I think I just can't imagine the same three guys going out there next weekend. It feels like something has to change. I'm with you. I think Hagen Smith's going to get the ball Thursday, and I think Gage Wood is going to get the ball Friday. And then after that, he might make a, maybe he'll wait and make a decision going into Saturday. I have a feeling he might already know and just want to keep that decision in his back pocket and not reveal it to Texas A&M. I wouldn't be stunned if we get if Molina gets another run out there, just because he only walked one batter this weekend, right? I mean, he only lasted an inning. He got hit so hard, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Molina. But I do think that there is a very real world where next weekend the starting pitching rotation is Hagen Smith, Gage Wood, and Ben Bybee, just because you trust those two guys, Wood and Bybee, to at least go out there and throw strikes, not give up free passes and hit by pitches. And I feel confident in Wood. I don't personally feel that much confidence in Bybee as a step up from Tiger and Molina, just because, I mean, ever since the Texas Tech game, he's kind of gotten hit. He's gotten hit pretty good when he's been out there on the mound, and it's really a bummer that freshman Colin Fisher's injury is proving to be a pretty big factor for this team, because I think if Colin Fisher was healthy, he would have been in the starting rotation this weekend against Mississippi State. I don't think Dave would have waited, just because as a freshman, he's been so good. He has not struggled with command all year, and he's got starting experience from the midweek. And when he has been thrown into the weekend, he's done pretty well against some of the bigger competition. But it's a moot point because he's out for the year, and thankfully we'll be back healthy for the start of 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. Fisher would probably have started this past weekend, and who knows, maybe even the weekend before that. I think Dave has been kind of upset with maybe the other two guys, their inability to throw strikes, and Fisher was pretty good at that, and I think that's honestly why Ben Bybee's going to get an opportunity to start. I like you. I don't have a ton of confidence in him. I think he's going to get hit pretty hard, especially with A&M's potent offense. I think they're gonna have a field day against them. But maybe there's a chance that he just gives up a lot of hard contact and able to get a bunch of flyouts or ground outs and let the defense work. At least you're not giving them bases, with free passes, either walking or hitting them, like we've seen the Tiger and Molina do. So it'll be interesting. It is a bummer with Fisher, and I'll also say it's honestly kind of a bummer with Hunter Dietz, being out for the year too, another freshman. He's not a guy that would probably be starting at this point, but if he had been able to come back mid-year and be the kind of guy that they thought he was going to be, he could maybe be your end of the game closer type, take the role from Gabe Gackle, and then maybe give you the flexibility to move Gabe Gackle in the starting rotation. I know that's something that we talked about in the press box. I wouldn't hate that. Gackle's the guy that can give you, even if he only gives you a 3-inning start, at least you got three, high leverage, kind of sort of high leverage in that, it's the beginning of the game, get you off to a good start and then go from there. So those two injuries to the freshmen are kind of looming large, maybe larger than we expected even a couple of weeks ago when we kind of first heard about them.
Yeah. I brought up the Gackle starting thing to you, and I like it, but I definitely wouldn't start both him and Gage Wood. I think you have to keep one of those guys in the bullpen. And it just seems from what Dave Van Horn has said that like the guy they're leaning towards moving to the starter would be Gage Wood. And that makes sense since Gackle's a freshman and he's had so much success out of the bullpen. Why would you want to maybe stunt this terrific, maybe All-American type season as a reliever? I mean, he genuinely might be, yeah, he'll definitely be a freshman All-American, but he might just be, I mean, he might be one of the best relievers, closers in all of baseball this year. And he got the job done in two separate outings this weekend, which was terrific to see. That's something he hasn't done yet this year, go twice on a weekend series. he had a little bit of struggles on Friday night, but Arkansas was able to get around that and preserve that series opening victory. Um, what did what'd you make of the defense this weekend, Hutch? Because we talked about it a little bit in the press box. A couple errors, a couple hits that we think should have been called errors. A little home cooking there in the official stat recordings, but they also made some. Peyton Holt made that incredible play in center field. There were some, Jared Sprague-Lott made a couple really nice plays. Like, I am starting to get a little concerned about this defense where it was a question mark before the season and they kind of erased it, but maybe now it's a regression to the mean type situation where it's something to monitor as the postseason arrives.
Yeah, I think this defense is above average, and it's very good statistically. I mean, I think they're fielding 982, which I believe would be the school record or tie the school record. It's still really good. I mean, it's coming into the weekend they were, I want to say, third nationally in fielding percentage, so really good. But it hasn't been quite the same as maybe some of the other really good defenses Arkansas has had in the past. I mean, you don't have Jalen Battles and Robert Moore up the middle, and that's no insult to Aloy and Stovall. I mean, those two guys are very good, and I think Stovall is pretty good, like really good as a second baseman. But they're not the same. It's a notch below, that double play tandem, and I think Sprague-Lott is sensational at third base. He's kind of about the same as what we've come to expect. But the outfield defense, Kendall Diggs, for all of his struggles at the plate, has still fielded pretty well. But as you've so accurately pointed out, he doesn't exactly have the best range in the world. And Peyton Holt is a converted infielder who has been fantastic in the outfield, but still not your typical Dominic Fletcher, Christian Franklin, kind of the guys you expect to be roaming center. That's more of Ty Wilmsmeyer, which if he could just hit a little bit would probably be playing. And then in left field, Ross Lovich has made a couple of just inexcusable plays, in my opinion, despite being a natural outfielder who even played some center field as a freshman at Missouri. Jason Jones, has, he still doesn't look quite super comfortable out there, but he's fine. Nothing spectacular defensively though, and Will Edmondson may be the better defender out of that group, but still not a Gold Glover by any means. So it's like they for the most part they make the plays they're supposed to make, and then every once in a while they'll sprinkle in a highlight reel play, but it's still not quite the elite level that we've come to expect from Arkansas. Like Hudson White behind the plate, throw him in there. Like, he's solid, but he's not going to throw a bunch of guys out, trying to steal bases. So it's weird. It's weird. Like they get the job done, but it just doesn't feel as good as maybe recent years.
Definitely. I can't speak to recent years, but nothing feels comfortable about this team's defense. Like, it's either exciting, amazing Sports Center top 10 or like, ooh, that looked a lot harder than it should have. I mean, even Ben McLaughlin we talked about, he's been very, very, very good at first base this year. And he had, I thought, a little bit of a shaky weekend at times, made a pretty big error on Saturday, I think, or right? Was that Saturday when he just missed the throw from Sprague-Lott? It might have been Friday. These games all run together, don't they? Anyways, it's I think I'm not too concerned with the defense, but it is something I'm going to be watching down the stretch, especially if the pitching gets a little worse, and Arkansas is not striking out as many guys as maybe they were earlier this season. It becomes even more amplified. And the starting pitching did struggle this weekend, but you mentioned it. I think the relievers, another terrific weekend for them. I think if you take out Ben Bybee, who has been a starter most of this year, they gave up 2 earned runs in 17 innings this weekend. Just phenomenal. They really kept Arkansas within striking distance when Mississippi State had an opportunity to go win the series on Sunday. And Dave said it. I kind of was surprised when he came in and sat down for his press conference Sunday night. The very first thing that he shouted out was the bullpen. It was a quick shout out, and then he went into the offense and talking about how nobody thinks we can hit, and we've struggled, but we believe we're a better hitting team. And that was clearly, I think, the biggest source of pride for him this weekend was the offense responding. But the first group that he pointed out was the bullpen and those relievers, just giving them a chance. And Gackle, McIntyre, Wood, Dissect, Parker Coyle got involved. Arkansas is blessed with all these arms, and I just hope for their sake that if they do have to make a change to the starting rotation, it doesn't negatively impact the bullpen. Maybe the likes of Parker Coyle, a Cooper Dissect can step up if there has to be some movement, like a Gage Wood to the starting rotation.
Absolutely. And, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more Stone Hewlett. I mean, I know he ended up just pitching, I think, the one time. I think he faced one guy or something, or two guys, and he was done. They really like him as a left-on-left specialist. But, I mean, if you're getting down to the bottom of the barrel, you might as well let him throw against some righties. He's been pretty good against them, too. So, very, very interesting. Christian Fouch is a guy that pitched twice this weekend, and not the best in the world, but all he's done is he's got a sub-1 ERA. That to me it seems a little bit misleading because he has given up some hits and some stuff like that, but he's not allowing a lot of runs. So you gotta like what you've seen, and especially if you can get Jake Faraday, where he's consistently giving you some action in the bullpen. There is a lot of potential. It's just a matter of if they can all live up to that potential all at once when it matters the most.
Definitely, Faraday's a good shout. I mean, he looks either unhittable or like he can't throw a strike. And honestly, more times than not this year, he's looked unhittable. I think for the most part, he's been pretty good this year. He had a little slip up immediately after, when the team went to Arlington, Texas and came back. He wasn't as sharp, but he's been pretty good in the SEC. I think he's a guy that maybe could, if they do move Wood to the starting rotation, take Brady Tigert and Jake Faraday, and then you replace Wood's production out of the bullpen. But we'll see. I think, again, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to know who's starting games 2 or game 3 until that lineup is turned in an hour before first pitch. So let's talk a little bit about the Texas A&M series coming up. I know you and I don't necessarily know too much about A&M, but they can obviously hit very well. They have pitched it pretty well all season too, which wasn't supposed to be like this astronomical strength of theirs, but they've been one of the better pitching teams in the country all year. They're coming in losing their last 2 series to LSU and Ole Miss, both on the road, so they'll be hungry to get back to College Station and play in front of their fans against Arkansas this weekend. Just how important is this series, Hutch, in your mind? You've been covering this team for a while. You've been covering SEC baseball for a while. How important is this series for Arkansas? Not even just winning the series, but playing well, winning a game, all that stuff.
Well, I think it would be big to at least win one game and go ahead and wrap up the division title. I think that would be big. Kind of give you, even if you lose a series, that you'd have a little bit of momentum going into the SEC tournament and then NCAA tournament. So that would be nice. To me, they've already clinched they're definitely hosting a regional at this point. They've got 19 wins. I think they're number 4 in the RPI or something like that. You're hosting a regional for sure. I honestly think you're a top 8 seed no matter what happens, based on just kind of historically speaking, because you're not going to drop much. I think A&M's number 3 in the RPI. You're on the road. Even if you lose all 3 games, you're not going to drop very much. You'll still be a top 8, RPI team, which coupled out with 19 SEC wins and 40-plus regular season wins, you're a top 8 seed. So really, there's not a whole lot to play for. But it is important for maybe some individual things. You'd like to see Kendall Diggs get going. You'd like to see the pitching staff kind of get solidified, however that looks, whether it be Tigert or Molina getting it back on track or somebody else emerging as a starter. You'd like to see that, even if maybe those things happen and you still don't win. I think that's okay. I think you'd have to feel good about how it went, but it's going to be a test for sure. I mean, A&M is really, really good, and they've got some dudes that can absolutely hit it. And I'm very much looking forward to how this series is going to go. I'm bummed. I've got to go to a wedding this weekend. So otherwise, I would probably be making the trip down to College Station because I think it's that big of a series and should be a really fun one to watch just from a spectator standpoint.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of relief too for Arkansas now going into this series because they won the Mississippi State, and it doesn't diminish the meaning, the how meaningful this series is against Texas A&M. But I do think, like, if Arkansas had lost Sunday's game and lost the series to Mississippi State, this A&M series would be a lot bigger than it is. Like, it would almost, like, you have to get a win because if you do get, I know you've been confident that they're going to be a national seed kind of regardless. I I was kind of concerned if they lost to Sunday and then got swept by A&M, maybe they play themselves out of that national seed. Um, it's gonna it's gonna be interesting to see what the bracketologies all say on Wednesday with Arkansas having a winning weekend and a lot of others around them not doing that. Do they go up? But with the context of the A&M series only, I'm with you. I think this is all about momentum. It's about adding another, SEC West champion to Baum Walker Stadium's outfield wall, and it's about just trying to figure something out with the starting pitching. I think because if they go down there and get swept, but the starting pitching is good, you know, then at least they figured something out there, and they can kind of. And then I guess the concerns would jump back to the offense, right? But I think the biggest key for them, the biggest thing for me this weekend is not really in the results, but what happens in that weekend rotation and how does Dave Van Horn kind of settle on something with the struggles of Tigert and Molina. You can't ask for a bigger, tougher test than the Texas A&M lineup when trying to figure out your weekend rotation now.
Absolutely, I'm very much looking forward to that, and maybe seeing how the bullpen adjusts if they do make changes to the starting rotation, like we were talking about earlier. Like, is Parker Coyle a guy that they can count on? I think that there were some really encouraging things that he had in the offseason. He pitched well in the Cape Cod League, and sometimes he gets hit around a little bit too much because that's maybe he. Whereas Tiger and Molina struggle to throw strikes, I think sometimes Coyle can struggle with throwing too good of strikes and gets hit a little bit. But I think Dave is willing to live with that. And who else can maybe step up? The other guys we mentioned, Faraday, Fouch, maybe Dylan Carter makes an appearance, or somebody like that. I'm kind of curious to see how the pitching staff as a whole, not just the rotation, but the bullpen behind those guys kind of shake out with any changes that are made to that rotation.
Definitely. It'll be very fun regardless. It's probably one of the 2, 3 best series of the entire year in college baseball. Top 5 teams, SEC West title on the line. Would be more fun if the SEC title overall was on the line, but Kentucky just keeps ruining these things for us. But kind of crazy, but I think it's a sign of just how deep the SEC is that Kentucky is going to is right now in the driver's seat to win the league. If they can win their series against Missouri and get a little, or against Florida. I'm all screwed up. Who is Kentucky playing this weekend? Do you know, Hutch?
Is it Vandy? Maybe.
It is Vanderbilt. There you go. Yep,
Yeah.
they need some help from they need to beat Vanderbilt, and then I believe Tennessee is playing Missouri, so they would need maybe a little help from Missouri. Anyways, none of that's about Arkansas. Let's turn the page here. Move to basketball. Adu Thiero committed to the Hogs probably just an hour after our podcast was published on Monday, where I sang sweet praises about Thiero and what kind of addition he would be. So, a little humble brag on that one. Not quite like Hutch predicting the Peyton Stovall home run, though. And so he brings the roster to, I think they have got 8 guys now. Is that right? And they might not be adding too many more. Coach Calipari said recently on a podcast that he only wants to bring in 8, 9, 10 guys, 10, 11 guys. Of course, there's the 13 scholarships is what are available to Division I programs, but he seems pretty set on staying under that number. His logic was, I don't want to develop players that are going to go play for somebody else. Makes sense, but there's also injuries in college basketball, and you're 2, 3 injuries away from being in a full-on crisis if you only have 8, 9 scholarship guys. We talked a little bit about the Sunday, Hutch. Just what are your thoughts on maybe that roster construction strategy? Do you actually believe Calipari when he says he's not going to use all the available scholarships?
I think he prefaced that statement by saying, "You might think I'm crazy, but," and yes, Coach Cal, I do think you're crazy. Now, who am I to doubt a Hall of Fame coach that has forgotten more about basketball in the past week than I'll ever know in my lifetime? But it just seems like, as you said, that the injury thing, worries me. He did say, I my first thought was like, well, what are you going to do about practice? Well, he did say he wants to get a bunch of GAs who are fresh out of playing, overseas in Europe or whatever, guys that played recently. I mean, he is bringing in Tyler Eulis. He's maybe not super recent, but I'm guessing he could probably still play a little bit, and help out from a practice standpoint. But what's the harm in bringing in a guy? He did say, like, if I bring in a 10th guy, it's going to be a guy who knows that he's the 10th guy. Because you don't want to bring in, you don't want to have a situation like this past year with Musselman's team where you've got 13 guys that all think they should be playing, and you're only going to be playing 7 or 8 of them. And who knows what kind of friction that can cause, and hurt the locker room and stuff like that. But what's the harm in bringing in a guy that maybe a under recruited 3-star guy that is not going to play, but maybe potentially he develops into something, down the line. And by year 3, he's able to contribute a little bit, as a sixth man or something like that. To me, that there's no harm in that. If he transfers, so be it. Yes, did you develop him for some other team? Sure, maybe, but you're it's not like those guys are probably going to go somewhere else in the SEC. I mean, if they're not playing much at Arkansas, they're probably going to drop down and go play at Stephen F. Austin or somewhere like that. Um, Especially if you could maybe even get an in-state guy. Maybe I put too much stock in those in-state guys, but who's to say that somebody can't love the Razorbacks? He just wants to play and have that Arkansas uniform on, and maybe he develops into something. That's, to me, that's how I would use those last few scholarships. What's the harm in it? You don't even have to guarantee them any NIL money or anything like that. Use all that on your big guns that you brought in. And so, like, to me, that's what you got to do. But if that's what he opts to do and they can stay healthy, then it really should be a non-factor. Those last few guys on the bench really shouldn't matter beyond getting in at the end of blowouts as kind of a victory cigar type of situation.
I'm with you, but I do think reading between the lines of what Calipari said in the new era of college basketball, I think one thing that he didn't say on the podcast, but uh, I'm just assuming. I'm just gonna go out and take my reporter hat off and kind of assume here. I think it's hard to get those guys, and it might not be by choice to get to have this 8, 9 scholarship guys, because then you have to convince one of a 3-star recruit in the transfer portal or whatever it may be. Like, it's hard to convince someone, hey, come and be the 9th, 10th guy on a team right now in college basketball, because those 9th, 10th guys can easily be the 3rd or 4th guy at a smaller school. And if they've got the confidence in themselves, then and the belief they can go there and maybe with unlimited transfers, one good year as the 3rd, 4th guy, maybe you can turn yourself into the 3rd, 4th guy for a program like Arkansas. You have to find the right guys that are want to come in, are okay taking up a scholarship spot and not being a meaningful contributor to the rotation. And I think that's really, really hard to find in today's era of transfer portal and NIL. I think Musselman last year probably recognized that and just went the complete opposite direction of, well, I'm just going to take as many guys as possible and figure it out. And that's not the worst strategy either, because competition is a good thing. Internal competition is a good thing for each team. I mean, there's definitely a scenario where last year plays out that all those guys make each other better. Jeremiah Davenport and KB competing for 3-pointers makes them both better. It just didn't happen with with last year's Arkansas team for whatever reason. Um, I don't know. I think it makes sense what Cal is saying. I don't think it's the smartest strategy because of injuries is really the only reason. Like if you could guarantee that your 8 scholarship guys are all going to stay healthy all year, then yeah, it makes 100% sense that that's what you should do. But you can't do that, and I think at the end of the day he's going to try and find some guys to round out the rotation or round out the bench, maybe not the rotation. Whether he's successful or not, time will tell. Uh, Real quick, DJ Wagner is kind of the next guy that's on commit watch. We won't dive too much into him to spare us 5 minutes of Thiero talk again. That turns completely outdated. But if Wagner does come, that's 9 guys. He's art like I think you're pretty much done then with the way he's talking about impact rotational pieces. Do you agree with that, Hutch? I mean, if Wagner does commit, that might be it for Arkansas's big, huge rotation next year.
Potentially, I mean, I know that there's also some talk about, I think his name's Kayshawn Pryor, the big man from South Florida, because I still think there's a need there to have another guy like that. I think he's 6'10", would be a good piece to put next to Big Z and Jonas Idu from Tennessee. I mean, I feel like that would be a good addition as well. But DJ Wagner would be critical as well to give you another kind of point guard guy to help out. I mean, yeah, that would put you at I think how many scholarships are? I mean, it's the 3 freshmen, then the 2 Kentucky transfers, and then the 2 transfers. So I think they're at 7 right now. I think Wagner would be 8, and then maybe you get Pryor as 9, and then he said a 10th guy would know he's a 10th guy. Maybe they bring in the Burks guy from Kentucky, who there's already a lot of speculation that he might be a silent commit already, but he's a guy that was didn't play a whole lot last year anyways. He would be a kind of your typical candidate to be a 10th guy. So maybe that, to
Real
me,
quick,
that's
Hutch. I don't
what.
want to cut you off, but Burks did commit to Georgetown
Oh, did he?
last week. Yeah, I think it was
Okay.
right when the baseball series was about to start or something like
See, I
that.
just completely missed that.
So
So yeah, there you
you're
go. So
good.
there maybe it's just Wagner and maybe Pryor if they can get him. But again, you'd have to convince Pryor that he would be part of a 3-man big man rotation with Big Z and I do. So gonna be interesting to see how Cal kind of pieces it all together.
And Thiero. I think Thiero is going to play a lot of the 4. I still think they need a big man, even with Thiero. I think I'm with you. I think they've got 3 more additions that they need to make. They need a point guard, whether that's Wagner or someone else that's maybe not that high of highly ranked. They need a point guard. They need another guard, whether that's a point guard, a combo guard, a bigger 2-way can be a guard or a forward, somebody like that. And they need a big man. So 2 guards and a big man, I think, are the last kind of spots that they need to fill. Are holes in the roster, and then after that, it's really just a matter of how Calipari wants to use the available scholarships and how he wants to construct this team. But if I do think if they don't add 2 more guards and a big man by the time we get to the season, I think there's some weaknesses in this roster that might separate it from being a top 10, top 5 team. Maybe it's just a top 15 team instead, which a lot of assumptions there given how we figured the Arkansas basketball team would perform last season, and they failed to live up to those expectations. So I might just be a pessimist about this program until I see a lot of wins on the Bud Walton Arena floor. I just haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in that. I think that there's just the nature of Arkansas fans is to be a little bit pessimistic because when something bad can happen, it usually has across multiple sports. So I think that's kind of it might be a good approach right now, kind of cautiously optimistic about this Calipari team and see what he can do in year 1. I mean, I think he hit the ground running at Kentucky and was able to get that program built up pretty quick, win a national title and stuff after a few years. So Not going to say he's going to do that at Arkansas, but he's definitely bringing in the talent, with the guys that he's got, from guys that followed him from Kentucky and the guys he's brought in, John L. Davis and Jonas Adu. I think it's a pretty talented lineup, and should put them in right in the contention in the SEC, and for hopefully a run in the postseason.
Definitely. And before we leave, I think we can wrap up there for basketball and baseball talk. Just wanted to shout out the Arkansas softball team. Not exactly a great finish to the season. They lost their last regular season series to Ole Miss, and then lost their first game of the SEC tournament to Missouri. But hosting a regional for the fourth straight year, it'll be Arizona, Villanova, and Southeast Missouri State coming to Fayetteville next weekend. I'll be out there covering some softball for USA Today, so looking forward to getting kind of my first real taste of Bogle Park this weekend, and should be a fun, high-stakes weekend out there. But with that said, I think we can wrap things up. Hutch, thank you so much for joining me. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to Hoggin the Mic. We will be back next Monday previewing the SEC baseball tournament and recapping the Arkansas baseball series at Texas A&M. It's going to be interesting to see how next week's podcast compares to this week's one, and just in terms of vibes and outlook. But it'll be a fun weekend nonetheless for Arkansas sports. Thank you all so much for listening. Everybody have a terrific week.